Have you ever seen a real life unicorn? Well, today you're going to get to see one, 1930 Ruxton. But before getting into all of it, I'm your host, Jay. Welcome to What It's Like, the automotive channel that features the unique and different cars that are unfortunately getting lost to time. History, specs, design. We post between 4 and 5 episodes each week, with engine episodes generally on Wednesdays. If any of that sounds of interest to you, subscribe and hit the bell icon next to it to never miss a video. Real quick announcement before getting into this one. Hershey is fastly approaching. For those that may have never heard of Hershey, Hershey is a week of fun and festivities. It's always the first full week in October. Hershey region has been hosting this show since 1955. It is the AACA Eastern Fall Nationals meet. It takes place at Hershey Park and surrounding areas, as well as the Giant Center. It's absolutely huge. It might be the biggest automotive flea market in the USA. But it's not just a flea market. They also have a car corral where they have completed cars, running cars, cars in all kinds of different conditions that kind of make a semicircle around the flea market. There's also cars for sale in the flea market. RM is having an auction at their Hershey Lodge. I'm going to leave the information right here if you're interested in going. Also, they have a car show where your car can be judged, and that is Friday. This year, the dates for Hershey is October 8th through the 11th, Tuesday through Friday. If you see me out there, I know it will be like the proverbial needle in a haystack, but be sure to say hi. 1930 Ruxton model lineup. But before getting into all of that, Ruxton was a car that was produced by New Era Motors, which was based in New York City, New York, and was in business from 1929 through 1930. Some sources say 1931. Not to get confused with the New Era Ford, which comes a little bit later in 1933 through 1934. New Era Motors only produced one car, the Ruxton. The man behind the Ruxton, William Muller, was a highly gifted engineer as well as race car driver. Muller would witness for the very first time a front-wheel drive car at Texas Oval Speedway in 1913 or somewhere around there, and thought that front-wheel drive was the future. Muller would start working at Edmund G. Budd Manufacturing Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Muller would work his way up through the company fast with his stellar engineering skills. In the mid-20s, Muller would propose the idea for a front-wheel drive car to the head of Budd Manufacturing Company, Ed G. Budd himself. Edward Budd was impressed and would greenlight to build not one, but two prototypes, functioning prototypes, I should say. One with front-wheel drive and a steel monocoque body. The other one had a Hupmobile body with a Studebaker power plant. After getting the go-ahead to build this car, Muller had one guy in mind for the body design, engineer Joseph Ledwinka, who was the nephew of Hans Ledwinka, who designed the Tatra frame. Because the car was going to utilize front-wheel drive, the engine could sit lower inside the chassis. Ledwinka would chop the Hupmobile bodywork, making it 10 inches shorter than anything else on sale at the time. The prototype would be finished sometime in 1928. It's also important to note that E.L. Cord was building a front-wheel drive car, the L29. Both the Ruxton and the L29 would be shown at the New York Auto Show in 1929. It's worth mentioning that these oftentimes get credited as the first front-wheel drive car, but that is so far from the truth. If you want to say first front-wheel drive vehicle, maybe a horse in front of a carriage. But seriously, the world's first self-propelled vehicle was built by Nicholas Joseph Cugnot, and it was front-wheel drive. Europeans would have front-wheel drive long before it became a thing in the US. They had front-wheel drive horseless carriages in the late 1890s. But here in the States, we didn't get front-wheel drive until the early 1900s. Many people think that Harry Miller was the first to come up with front-wheel drive being used in his front-wheel drive race cars, but actually John Walter Christie actually held the patent for the front-wheel drive concept in the early 1900s. He would build a prototype in 1904. The Ruxton was the first planned front-wheel drive mass production car, but Cord would end up beating it to market. Cord would use Harry Miller's transaxle design under license. Muller would design his own transmission/transaxle, which featured a unique split transmission. It was a 3-speed manual with reverse. It was split with second and third gears behind the worm drive differential, first and reverse gears in front of the differential. Crown and pinion gear was replaced by worm drive. A guy by the name of Archie Andrews would become a major shareholder of Budd Manufacturing Company. He also got a seat on the board of directors. Archie Andrews was a financier, stock manipulator who gained an enormous fortune in a relatively short amount of time. Starting from nothing, it's important to point out that this guy was ruthless in his ways of making capital, especially with workers and shareholders. Archie Andrews was absolutely floored over the car when he saw it for the very first time. Andrews wanted to produce the car, while Edward Budd wanted to license the technology and just get a licensed royalty on each one produced. Eventually, Edward Budd would go on vacation, and as the old saying goes, while the boss is away, the mice are at play. Andrews would obtain the prototype. And sources conflict. Some sources say that he bought the prototype outright. Other sources say that he borrowed it and never returned it. Either way, Archie Andrews was going to do everything in his power to see this car come to production. So he would approach Hupmobile, which he was also part of the board of directors, wanting to see if they could produce the car. Negotiations would ultimately fall through. Andrews, seeing a future in the front-wheel drive concept, Andrews figured he could probably bring the car to market himself. So in 1929, he established New Era Motors Incorporated. Andrews would hire William Muller as vice president. Muller was responsible for all the engineering aspects of the car. Andrews would find different ways to finance this venture. It's important to note that up to this point in time, the car didn't really have a name. Andrews would meet a wealthy stockbroker named William Ruxton. Andrews would name the car after Ruxton in hopes that Ruxton would invest or donate money to get the car to market. Ruxton never gave money to the cause, and in fact, William Ruxton tried to get the company to change the name Ruxton because he didn't want his name associated with that car. But the name would stick. Andrews would go to Gardner Motor Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri, who built luxury cars from 1920 through 1931. They would accept a deal, but they would back out while New Era was sending the tooling to build the cars. Interestingly to note that Gardner had their own front-wheel drive concept car at the New York Auto Show in 1930. A bit disappointed but undeterred, Andrews would go to Marmon in Indianapolis. Marmon was in, but the day that the agreement was to be signed, the stock market crashed, which Marmon would back out. Andrews also went to Jordan, Stutz, Peerless, all declined because they wasn't doing so hot financially. Andrews finally would get a deal to build the car. The Ruxton from an unlikely source. It's almost like reading a bad fortune cookie. Lucky numbers are 1930, Ruxton. Anyway, Moon Motors would produce the car, but upon further examination of Moon's building facilities and practices, it didn't live up to Andrews' expectations, and he wasn't that impressed. So Andrews would go to Kissel Motor Company, which was located in Hartford, Wisconsin. Kissel built trucks and luxury cars from 1906 to 1931. They would agree to build the transmissions and transaxles, but not long after that agreement was made, Moon Motors was facing bankruptcy. So Andrews turned to Kissel Motor Company to produce the bodies as well. And it seemed like everything was on course to make this car come to market, but it wasn't happening at the rate in which Andrews wanted it to go down. So, frustrated and channeling his inner asshole, Andrews began buying up shares of stock in Kissel Motor Company. He wanted a controlling stake in the company so he could force his hand. George and Will, the two Kissel brothers, wasn't having any of it, and they placed the company into voluntary receivership. Kissel would produce 20 Ruxtons. In November of 1930, Moon Motor Car Company stockholders sued New Era Motors for mismanagement and dissipation of assets. The lawsuits went on for decades, but Moon was finished. They liquidated the tooling and the stamping dies for Ruxton, effectively killing New Era Motors, which filed for bankruptcy on the 29th of November of 1930. Let's talk specs. It rides a wheelbase of 130 inches. It weighs around 3,900 pounds. Price, $3,195, which would be equivalent to you spending $60,225.94 in the year 2024. Total Ruxton production was 96 units, of which only 12 Roadsters were said to have been produced. Moving on to engine, only one engine on offer, 268.6 Continental 18S Flathead 8, 4.4 liters. It was good for 100 horsepower, 3,400 RPM, estimated 160 pound-feet or 216 newton meters at 1,800 RPM with a bore of 3 inches and a stroke of 4.8 inches. Huge, and I mean huge, thank you to the Auburn Cord and Dusenberg Museum for giving us the opportunity to feature this car and share the history behind the brand. If you're ever out in Auburn, Indiana, or anywhere near it, it's right up the road from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and definitely worth the drive. You got to check this museum out. You'll see stuff that you only read about in this museum. And this building was the original Auburn Cord and Dusenberg administration building. There's just so much history. If the walls could talk, it's one of those kind of places. It's an absolutely incredible place, bucket list place if you're a car enthusiast. For hours of operation, admission pricing, and directions to get there, be sure to click the link below after the show. Let's talk styling on this absolutely gorgeous car. We're going to start down here with the wheels. Notice they're full discs. Also look at this insignia here, this motif. How cool. I love that the tail kind of forms an 8 shape for 8-cylinder. I'm assuming, or that could all be coincidence. Also notice the white walls on this thing. There's a big part here and then there's pinstripes. Two-tone paint design. It's got small wood light fender markers. How cool is that? With the pinstriping going towards it. This car also has wood lights. Just look at all of the detail in that light design, which rests on the bar that connects the fenders so they don't flap in the wind going down the road. Check out the grill. Check out that grill. Notice it comes to a point in the center. License plate mounted right in front of the grill. Just look at all of the different colors, the two-tone colors. Just the Ruxton badge. Notice this car does not have a huge mascot. It does have a tiny one. And then the center line going back towards the single-piece windshield with the windshield wiper on the top. The bumpers are pretty basic. 2 bars with a brace in the center. Another Ruxton crest. I absolutely dig how they did this two-tone paint scheme. So check out the fender profile, how it comes down. It has side mounts which are in this cloth case with Ruxton. The hood opens totally different than I've seen any other hood open. Look at those latches. It opens like a trunk. I think that's pretty cool as well. Notice how this top is raised. It does have a cowl. The windshield can fold. This car does not have running boards, but it does have mud flaps at the bottom here, as well as down here. More pinstriping. Also, look at how they tie this end. It matches the front, which is a really nice touch. The back bumper, it mimics the front bumper with the brace in the center, just like the front bumper. This one has an external trunk. And there's only brake lights on this side. This side has steps to get into the rumble seat. Step there, rumble seat. Gas filler is on the passenger side. Here's what over the hood would look like. Here's what first person over the hood would look like. Up above, there is a windshield wiper motor, no sun visors. There is a rear view mirror with a clock, and there's another rear view mirror. This car doesn't have any side mirrors, come to think of it. Taking a real quick gander at the engine, Continental flathead inline 8 that is mounted in reverse. Also worth pointing out that the hood is butterfly hinged. The part with the louvers can be removed, otherwise access is just at the top. The engine pictured has an alternator and a generator, which is super interesting. Horn is mounted to the side of the engine block. External oil filter just below the horn. Also, take a look at the coolant pipe on the top. On the positive side, lost and forgotten car that I'm willing to bet the farm no one else has at a car show, unless it's a Ruxton show, of course. 96 were made, exclusivity, but it conflicts on how many there were actually produced. A lot of sources say 96. Some sources say no more than 300. There's other sources that say 500. Either way, it's a rare car. It's definitely going on the White Whale playlist. The Ruxton is considered a Classic Car Club of America classic. It has an interesting and convoluted history, awesome color combinations, spunky styling, low-slung car. The woodlights make this car, but interesting to note, the woodlights were an option. And yet, when you think of this car, it's the woodlight headlights is something that just stands out. Some trivia that I totally forgot to put in the video. And I wasn't going back to put it in because we were past that point. Anyway, the Ruxton is an interesting discussion piece for people in the know. But even people that don't dig vintage/classic cars will know it was something special. Just from the looks of it. It sort of has that hot rod look before the hot rod thing was even really a thing. Against it, New Era Motors, more specifically Archie Andrews, was, if this was a Disney and Pixar movie, he would be the villain. It's part of the car's history. Just think, he is responsible for killing Moon Motors, Kissel Car. I don't know the story of Gardner, but I think, just as a hypothesis, that Gardner dumped whatever little capital that they had left into building their own front-wheel drive vehicle. It was expensive at the time, and nobody had money. They rarely, if ever, come up for sale. We're back to the Ruxton now. All are spoken for. They're really hard to find. Even in the wild. I've been looking for 2 years, and the day that I saw this one, I actually saw 2. Parts are impossible to find in different construction quality because these were being built at any and all companies that could build these cars. It was the right car for the wrong time. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. 2 scenarios today. In the first scenario, would you rather have a 1930 Gardner or 1930 Ruxton, or 1930 Kissel car. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. On to the second scenario. 1930 Cord L29, or 1930 Ruxton, or 1930 Imperial. Once again, going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. All right, now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to give all three: name of the band, song title, and the sentence that comes next will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section. I'm not a hero. I'm not the savior. Forget what you know. So once again, looking for the name of the band, song title, and the lyric and or sentence that comes next. First person to do all three will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section. Hint, it's not from the 30s, it's not from the 40s, it's not from the 50s, but it could be from the 60s, 70s, and beyond. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below. I read and answer all comments posted. I don't say that for self-worth. I just say that if you take the time to post a comment on here, I will definitely read it. If you don't want to post a comment and want to talk to me more one-on-one, send me an email at what_it's_like@yahoo.com. Thanks again for everything. I appreciate everything that you guys bring in the comment section. I love the critiques. I love reading the stories and the memories that you guys share. Until next time, toodaloo! All right, welcome to the after party. This bit of video doesn't have any sound or music, but you can add whatever music you'd like to listen to. Enjoy.